uniform. And
well, it's also
different.
people are very concerned about this possibility of us going to war with Iran, and they think that this might have started that off.
Yeah. I think what changed the calculus here is Iran is, the regime is brutal and awful. They're not crazy, and the one thing they want more than anything else is to retain power. That's it. And I think they looked at the idea of a military conflict, a direct military conflict with the U.S. And this is not to say that their proxies won't, strike out at us someplace around the world at some point. But the regime looked at that and thought, nah, you know what, we're not going to do this. In part because, the killing of Soleimani is important on a much bigger level than just taking out, a terrorist of his stature. It's important for deterrence purposes. And so, I think they looked and felt like the calculus in dealing with the U.S. has shifted now. And they don't understand it. They're not comfortable with it. And also they can't afford it. Look, if we got in a military conflict, that was the idea that, somehow we were going to get in World War III. It would be over in an evening. Literally, it would be over in one night. We have the ability to take out their entire energy infrastructure, their missile bases, their key military facilities. And I don't want to oversimplify this, but after that first night's activity, that's it. They're done. So the idea that somehow there's going to be now, does that mean that we should do that? Of course not. Nobody wants a military conflict. But and again, there would be knock-on repercussions, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully we can sort this thing out through now that we're doing the military deterrence and they understand that we're serious. We've got the economic pressures, we've got diplomatic pressure, primarily to keep them isolated. I think we're on the right track with Iran. I think we're going to see a different reaction from them.
Well, I was a little bit relieved when they attacked back and just sort of launched missiles on the outside of bases. Nobody died. I was like, okay, so it seems like this is almost like they're making a signal like they're attacking, but they're not really doing anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there was an optic to it. I think you're right, absolutely, that they felt like they had to do something.
Yeah.
The Ayatollah's got I don't know whether you call it saving face or not, but, and we had a warning. We had warning ahead of time.
And didn't they print in their paper, didn't they say that they killed a bunch of people?
They did.
In the missile attack?
Yeah, they claimed about 80 or so, I think.
Great. Keep saying it.
Right, exactly. Just do whatever it takes. But then, but look at the reaction that we've had. Of course, the Ukrainian commercial passenger jet went down.
Yeah. And that was them, right?
Oh, that was definitely them.
So do you think that they shot it down because they thought it was a U.S. military plane?
Yeah, it was. Look, this is it. It's not unprecedented. I mean, we shot down an Iranian passenger jet years and years ago, right? The Russians shot down. They still won't admit to it, but they shot down a passenger jet over Ukraine. Just a handful of years ago, which they still won't admit to. It's human error. And it's human error in a conflict zone, in a situation where there's a lot of moving parts, and it's never going to be a zero-risk game. So if the Iranians had done this, as tragic as it is, and come out and said, "Oh my God, we did this," okay, well, it would have been horrific, but they did this to themselves. Because they just couldn't bring themselves to be truthful. They've got a long track record of not. And so they engaged in this and shot it down. When you find missile debris in a field where you're doing an investigation of a plane crash, that's a pretty good indication. And then there's the video on top of that.
Oh, there is a video of the missile hitting the plane?
Yeah, 2 missiles.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Yeah, 30 seconds apart, roughly 30 seconds apart. So
it took 2 missiles to bring down a plane?
Yeah, it hit the first one. The first one hit. And then about 30 seconds later, not quite 30 seconds later, the second missile hits. There's another fireball. And the plane stays up in the air for, a period of time just because it's not devastated, but it was some 20 miles from the airport. It had actually kind of made as if it was turning back to the airport, probably right after that first missile hit. But here's the thing. That's a tragic disaster right there, right? But the idea that somehow nobody's actually saying they did it on purpose. They didn't do it on purpose. They did it. It was an accident. They mistook it for either an incoming missile or a hostile aircraft, coming in for a bombing run after they launched their ballistic missile strike. So nobody's saying it was done on purpose, but it's it's indicative of the Revolutionary Guard force and the regime itself that they spent several days denying it and saying it was mechanical failure and pressuring the Ukrainians to come out and say it was mechanical failure, which they then reversed course on that once it became obvious. So it's a tragic situation. But now the protests out in the streets of Iran, which are a continuation of the past several months, right, which were targeted at a corrupt regime, have picked up strength in light of that, because the people are just, we're tired of this.
Yeah.
And who knows where it's going to go. I suspect, unfortunately, I'm fairly cynical about all this. We've been hoping the Iranian population would kind of rise up for decades, and it doesn't happen because it's a pretty brutal regime. We don't understand that. We don't understand how difficult they are, right, and how serious-minded they are about holding on to power. So every now and then we think, okay, here come the protests. Oh, it's going to topple the regime, and it doesn't happen. So maybe it's different this time. I don't think so.
Now, were you concerned at all? And this is one of the things when you say that we could go in there and level them in a day. The real issue is their allies, right? The real issue is China and Russia.
Yeah, but they're not going to do anything. China and Russia aren't going to do anything. It's not in their best interest. And they if they're consistent about one thing, both those countries, it's that they act in their own best interest. And they would look at that and go, yeah, I'm sorry. Look, so what are we dealing with in that immediate area? Iran's closest ally is Syria, right? Soleimani spent, billions of, Iranian dollars or money that they couldn't afford to, and that should have been spent on its population, arming, training, equipping, and dealing with the Syrian war and keeping his pal Assad in power. So Iran and Assad and Syria are tied together, but is Syria in a position to somehow rise up and engage? This is not going to be. This wouldn't have been a conflict as we imagine it, right? It wouldn't be a conflict of occupying space and ground and all the rest of it. Nobody wants it. Nobody needs it. It's not good for anybody. I'm not